Hello, and welcome to Real-Time Marketing, How to Modernize Your Campaigns for Maximum Results. This is a one-to-one media webinar sponsored by RedPoint Global. I'm Mila D'Antonio, Editor-in-Chief of One-to-One Media and your moderator for today's event. First, let me introduce you to today's speakers. Our first speaker is Rusty Warner, who is Principal Analyst at Forrester Research. Rusty serves customer insights professionals at Forrester, and his research focuses on marketing technologies, including customer analytics, cross-channel campaign management, enterprise marketing platforms, and digital customer experience delivery. Rusty has more than 25 years experience in marketing and customer analytics, product management and marketing leadership and strategic planning. Before joining Forrester, he was Senior Vice President of Marketing for SDL's Campaign Management and Analytics Division, focused on solutions for marketing automation, customer analytics, campaign management, and email marketing. Welcome, Rusty. Our second speaker is Jason McNellis, Vice President of Product Strategy at RedPoint Global. At RedPoint Global, Jason works closely with the product team to develop the next generation of marketing tools for improved customer experience and marketing performance. Prior to joining RedPoint Global, Jason was a Senior Analyst with Forrester Research, serving customer insight professionals and helping them leverage customer data to improve marketing and overall business performance. Jason's also has extensive experience leading analytics teams at M Squared Group and SuperValue. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Mila.
Before I review the agenda, let's go over the On24 interface. If you have a question for our speakers, please click the red Q&A icon. If you encounter any technical issues with the On24 system, please click the gold question mark for a list of FAQs. We also encourage you to take a survey at the end of today's presentation. This survey is located just to the right of the Speaker Bios widget. All attendees will receive an email with a link to the archived version of this webcast. And finally, if you're tweeting, the hashtag for this event is real-time marketing. So today's agenda includes Forrester's new definition for real-time marketing, the 3 dimensions necessary for real-time success, today's landscape of real-time marketing technologies, and examples that will help accelerate your real-time strategy. Again, this webinar will be followed by a Q&A and post-event survey. So let's get started. Customers today have come to expect brands to engage with them in personal ways across all devices and channels. These new expectations require marketers to rethink their campaigns, yet many marketers still struggle to implement real-time contextual messaging. Today, Jason will draw from his industry experience, and Rusty will include insights from 2 recent Forrester reports that he authored that detail the core capabilities and necessary tools to enable real-time interaction management. Both Jason and Rusty will discuss what you need to know about real-time marketing to win, serve, and retain more customers. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rusty.
Thank you very much, Mila, and thanks everyone for joining us for today's webinar. Before we get into real-time marketing, I'd like to take a look at what's driving marketing requirements today. The picture here is from the television program Modern Family, but I'm sure many of you can relate to it. I'm an American, but I live in England, and when my sister and her husband came to visit me last summer with their 2 teenage daughters, we did what you normally do in the English summer. We booked a holiday cottage in Cornwall. And of course, even though I look for a nice, romantic little cottage on the seaside, the most important characteristic was whether the house offered Wi-Fi. And I'd like to say that that was driven by the teenagers, but in fact, all of us were on our phones and our tablets and our laptops every morning and every evening. Now, at least we did get out and enjoy the countryside during the day, but it's not that long ago when personally I would have unplugged on a holiday. My laptop and my mobile phone were only for work, but that's no longer the case. And if you're like me, your digital devices are no longer for work. They've become indispensable in your personal life as well. Now, our internet-enabled devices and all that instant access to information have given us higher buying power. And that's good for consumers, but obviously it presents some problems for brand marketers who have to keep pace with those expectations. Pricing is very important to us still, but more than ever, we're looking for value. As I said, everyone likes a good deal, but the overall experience and the perception of value will really drive purchases beyond the transactions themselves. Now, as we become more adept at using our digital devices, our behavior is also changing. If any of you have ever used Uber or Airbnb, then you're aware of that change. Did you ever think that just a few years ago you would have jumped into a car with a complete stranger and had that person drive you to another complete stranger's house where you would stay in a guest room instead of a hotel? And those apps are only the tip of the iceberg in terms of the game changers that are out there that are really driving our behavior as consumers today. Our desire to get what we want and when we want it means that we're also losing patience with advertising. Since I'm based in the UK, I'll give you a London statistic. The estimate is that if you commute for 45 minutes in London on public transport, you'll be exposed to 130 ads featuring more than 80 products in just that 45 minutes. During the entire day, you'll see more than 3,500 ads. So with all of those ads competing for our attention, there's no way the human brain can absorb all of that information, and it shouldn't surprise a brand that when we have the chance with the click of a mouse or the slide of a finger to get rid of an ad and remove it from sight, that's exactly what we're going to do. Forrester refers to this new era of consumer empowerment as the age of the customer. And to be successful in the age of the customer, brands need to become fully obsessed with customer engagement, which will require a fundamental shift in marketing. Now, I mentioned earlier that this is a hard and difficult challenge for marketers, but it's also good news because we're now seeing that marketing is mission critical to the success of a business. And marketers can find success if they embrace the responsibility that they now have, which is understanding customer context. So what do we mean by customer context? It does, as I said, represent a fundamental shift in marketing focus. In the past, marketers may have been focused on campaigns, but now we're seeing a focus on interactions. Campaigns need to support continuous interactions throughout the customer life cycle. Along with campaigns in the past, we had targeting. You know, I'm not sure why anyone ever thought it was a good idea to develop tactics so we could execute campaigns at targets. Those military terms really didn't lend themselves well to customer engagement, which is now the new remit. It's also no longer good enough that we focus on customer segments. Wherever possible, we need to recognize our customers as individuals. It's also about when it makes sense to those customers for the engagement. Our media schedules are completely out the window, and we need to figure out when is right in the customer's mind to conduct that interaction. When we do, we can no longer just focus on a message or information. There has to be something useful in that communication for the customer. And as we talked about, it's no longer just about the price or the money involved in the transaction. Customers are really looking for a value exchange. So if you're a marketer and you manage to make that shift over to the terms that we see on the right for context, last but not least, you also need to change the way you measure your success. In the past, you might have used your gross rating points or your cost per thousand for media impressions or for your email volume, and that's no longer going to cut it. We need to think instead about the minutes of engagement that we can have with our customers if we focus on understanding their contextual requirements. So now I'm going to hand it over to Jason, and he's going to give us some more information on the importance of customer context.
Thanks, Rusty. And I wanted to start by just giving an example of kind of that top line, how an interaction might look different from a campaign. So about a month ago, I was in the San Diego airport, had a half an hour to catch up on email before boarding my flight. And so I went onto the free Wi-Fi, and I observed one of these advertisements, right, for kind of one of these upbeat, zippy advertisements for a Surface 3. Something that we might think of as a campaign. But there was a problem with this interaction. And what the problem was I was on my new Surface 3. I was on the exact machine that they were advertising for me. And so this was a little detracting for me from the brand. And that's too bad because it could have been a reinforcing brand moment if they just would have added a piece of context, like my device ID. And then they could have served me an ad, but really made it more interactive by just thanking me and recognizing me for using the Surface 3 while I was enjoying, the internet that they were providing. And I think this point of using real-time analytics can make both marketing and even more generally customer interactions better, more engaging, and also drive better business business outcomes. Now, this point of context is bigger than just that simple advertising. Recently, there was an article in the Journal of Marketing where they talked about how important context is for television advertising. And the conclusion from one of the authors is here, and they said it's really important that advertisers keep in mind context. And the reason he said that was because what they showed through a series of 6 experiments was how, when there were upbeat ads placed in what they called deactivating programming, and they gave examples of Homeland, The Americans, The Good Wife, where the audience gets really engaged and almost kind of tense during the program, that if they show ads that typically do well, actually the brand recall and the time on ad significantly decreases. And that's another example of where context matters. But whether you're a mass advertiser or a campaign manager or a digital marketer, this condition is true. The importance of context for making your marketing or your communication engaging. And the challenge that a lot of us face is that this context requires real-time decisioning. So I was excited to join Rusty because I think, and more generally we at RedPoint think, that these classic campaign markets are starting to change. And the key part of that change is around real-time decisioning and how that allows marketers to leverage context. So next I'm going to hand it back to Rusty, who's going to talk some more about how campaigns are changing.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, let's take a look at campaigns because you might have come away from our previous discussion thinking that what I'm telling you is campaigns are dead. And that's certainly not what I'm saying. Campaigns are not dead. They remain an integral part of the marketing mix. But they are evolving. Our campaigns now, more than ever, need to be consistent across digital and offline channels. They need, of course, to be relevant and engaging. They need to provide value. They need to be delivered at the right time. And if we get it right, they will spark continuous cycles of interaction instead of being a one-off delivery mechanism of a piece of content or an offer. And so for the campaigns to evolve, they have to embrace what we refer to as real-time interaction management. Now, here's Forrester's rather long-winded definition of real-time interaction management. I can't be too critical since I actually wrote it, but we define real-time interaction management as marketing technology that enables us to deliver contextually relevant experiences or value or utility and do that at the appropriate moment. That might be real-time. It might not be real-time, but the right time for the customer, as in the right point in the customer life cycle. Obviously, people have a very different frame of mind when they are exploring their options versus when they're ready to buy, as compared to afterward when they might be looking for customer services. So regardless of that moment in the life cycle, in real time where necessary, we need to deliver that appropriate offer, and we need to do that across the right touch point. Now, there are three elements of real-time interaction management. First, it's about the customer. And I know that seems like an obvious statement, but we need to recognize our customers as individuals across inbound and outbound channels. We then need to merge that customer's identity with his or her history. And that's a lot easier, of course, when we know the customer. But we can also capture a great deal of information about unknown or anonymous visitors to a website or other channels. And after we've captured that information, whether the person is known or unknown, we need to consider the current context. Where is the customer in the buying journey? What's the current interest or the current browsing behavior, and what does that tell us? What time is it? What's the weather like? What other conditions might exist right now that would influence the offer we make or the propensity of that customer in terms of accepting the offer? And that brings us to the next piece, which is analytics. And with analytics, we're talking a couple of different areas. We'll use analytics to determine the appropriate action or offer or content or message, and that will involve a lot of analytics capability, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. We'll also use our analytics so that we can capture the results of the interactions, measure our success, and then optimize what we're doing for that individual, as well as optimize our overall marketing strategy and our marketing investment. The third requirement is all about orchestration, and that involves the delivery and the dialogue management at the appropriate touch point. For real time, that's going to be the web or mobile device or possibly a contact center, but we have to keep in mind that sometimes the interactions are going to occur simultaneously online and offline. We might also use channels that we don't always think of as real time, like email or direct mail, to complement that primary interaction channel in the case of sending a confirmation or following up to that primary interaction. So let's take a look at some of the requirements behind these three components of real-time interaction management. First, we'll look at customer recognition. And to achieve this, we'll apply techniques like customer segmentation, or we'll build out detailed customer profiles. It's also important to enable our customers to decide and dictate their own preferences for customer engagement, including which channels they'd like to use and what content they'd like to receive from us. We have to remember it's about a customer-managed relationship more than customer relationship management. And that's true even when we're dealing with anonymous prospects or customers, where we need to resolve their identities using digital intelligence so that we can then match their behavior with a customer profile once that person signs in or completes a transaction to authenticate their identity with us. And of course, we need to do all of this consistently across channels and across the different devices that a customer might be using. A good example of applying customer recognition is Ann Taylor, which is part of Ann Inc. And they extend their concepts of the marketing strategy all the way to the top and bottom line business objectives. If you open up the 2013 annual report for Ann Inc., you'll see Evolving with Her. If you open the 2014 annual report, you'll see Seamless Evolution. And those themes were the marketing strategies for those 2 years for Ann Incorporated, and they carried through right the way to the boardroom and showed up as the strategy in the annual report. One of their key initiatives is enriching the shopping experience, and they do that with insights that demonstrate their understanding of the customer. They've explored social media, and they've then added that to their transactional data and their customer profiles so that they can understand what drives shopping decisions at different stages of the customer buying cycle. They also take pride in understanding that their customers perform different roles during any given day. For example, Ann Taylor sells primarily work clothes or evening wear, but the sister brand, The Loft, sells casual clothing. And they really take that evolving with her or seamless evolution very seriously to understand that during one of their shoppers' very busy life, she may have different needs at different times when she comes to the store or visits the online site. And so customer recognition goes a long way to helping them understand and serve that shopper's needs. Well, we've talked a lot about context already, but really for contextual understanding, we've got to do a few things. We've got to merge the customer history with real-time behavior and also with real-time data that tells us about the current situation. So there are lots of different tools that would support this kind of activity, including digital intelligence, such as web or mobile analytics or social listening data. And all of that will provide insight and give us a deeper understanding of the customer journey and which offers might be relevant at any given time. And let's look at an example of that. And we'll turn to Asia for this example. Pizza Hut in Asia have developed 17,000 microsegments because, as you might imagine, the fast food industry, or as Pizza Hut would say, the quick service industry, is very different in Asia than it is compared to the West. There are lots of different competitors. In fact, there are thousands right in front of people as they walk onto the street from their office. And so understanding what might motivate a behavior or understanding a customer's behavior becomes critical. So they take those 17,000 microsegments and then personalize them even further so that they know if a young man typically buys a pizza on Friday night, that when he's leaving the office on Friday evening, that they can make an offer. He'll likely see that offer on his mobile phone on the train and order the pizza so that it's waiting for him when he walks in his door. So Jason, I'm going to hand it back over to you so that you can talk to us more about customer recognition and the ability to understand contextual requirements.
Thanks, Rusty. Let me give two more examples and just kind of build off of what you started. So in this first case, let's imagine a website. We have visitors coming to this website. Our first case, we have an anonymous visitor, and there's one piece of content that we're going to customize for that website based on what we can know from the visitor. So in this first case, as we're customizing content A, it's news based on geography that we can get from the IP address or the keywords that they used that sent them to our sites, relatively limited amount of information. But as this person continues to click on the site, we could then continue to update this content in real time based on that original information plus their browsing history, right? So we're starting to build a little history of this anonymous visitor. Now when they return, they'll be semi-identified, and so we'll have all that previous history plus what's going on specific to this visit, and we will further customize this content to drive the behavior that we're looking for, right? Maybe a registration, maybe a purchase, maybe just a sign-on, so this person can become identified as we see in the third case here. And to Rusty's point, this recognition can be progressive, going from anonymous to semi-anonymous to identified, and we're also continually leveraging the history to get better and better recommendations in real time. Now you might be asking yourself a question, well, why is the real-time decisioning important? Could we just rely on pre-made rules or predetermined predictive analytics to figure out that content? And I think the example that Rusty gave with Ann Taylor shows the shortcoming of that, is that this customer is quite likely visiting your website with different use cases in mind. And the ability to update that content in real time, inferring the context of that use case based on their browsing behavior is really what we're doing, allows us to provide a better experience to that customer. You know, another example would be, imagine you're going to a large shopping website. You know, I might be going to Amazon, and if I'm shopping for myself, they might be offering me one type of books, but if I'm shopping for my dad for Father's Day, they need to recognize that and start offering me a very different type of books. And that's where the real-time analytics and leveraging the context of what is the mission of that shopping trip becomes so important. Another example where this could become important is device sharing, right, where you have more than one person using the device and you want to be able to recognize that in real time and change the content accordingly. Now, I just want to point out that in this example, we're actually doing a couple different things in real time. In a few cases, we're doing real-time recognition. So we're recognizing, you know, the return of this cookie or the return of this identified visitor. But in a lot of these other cases, we're actually doing real-time decisioning, where we're making a decision or we're applying an algorithm in real time to come up with that content. Now let me take this a step further and talk about a much different use case. Also in Asia, kind of like a Pizza Hut, here's a client that we're working with on a proof of concept, and what they're trying to do, this is for retail gas, is they're trying to drive cross-sell. Specifically, they're trying to encourage people who are filling up their car at the pump to come into the store and buy from one of their several branded convenience food items. And what they had in place before they were talking to us was a lot of kind of classic analytics, customer profiles, appended data. They had multiple segmentations in place. They had product affinity models to try to predict this cross-sell, but they weren't completely satisfied with the performance. So what we talked to them about was this idea of, is there an opportunity to leverage context? So to provide an example, they had a segment that repeatedly shopped or repeatedly filled up their cars from 4 to 7 in the afternoon on weekdays. Very easy to imagine that these are people likely coming home from work and filling up their car on their commute home. Well, it'd be easy to set up a predictive model to then predict, hey, these are the kind of hot, fast, convenience food items we should try to cross-sell through say the gas pump interface to get them to come into the store. The challenge with that kind of predictive analytics, though, is they're going to be batch scored and they're going to be static. In other words, they won't be able to leverage context, and certainly not context in real time. Well, why is that important? Imagine we take one of those segment members that I talked about earlier. They're filling up their car with gas on a Friday, but it's 10 a.m., and they're at a station that's 100 miles north of where they normally fill up with gas. Well, those two pieces of context really provide a clue for a different type of trip. But if the brand's going to take advantage of that contextual information, they need to do that in real time or near real time to drive that conversion and make that more appropriate cross-sell offer. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Rusty, who's going to introduce and talk a little bit about our second component of real-time marketing.
Thanks, Jason. Let's take a look at analytics. And as I said, this takes multiple forms. In addition to the customer analytics and the segmentation that we use for customer understanding, here's where things get a lot more advanced. Here we're going to apply predictive models and self-learning algorithms that will determine the appropriate offer or content for one of the given situations like Jason just described. Our testing mechanisms will provide more insight into what's working and what's not so that we can make adjustments. And of course, all of our offers have to be governed by business rules. we need to apply regulatory compliance in some cases, or in others, we need to make sure that we are able to serve the customer's need with the appropriate inventory at the right location and so forth. We also need to look at priorities, and not just our marketing priorities, and determine what's right for the customer as well as what's going to be profitable for the business overall. Now, we know that with the age of the customer, the airline industry has evolved tremendously, and their business, lots of businesses, but certainly in the airline industry more than any other, I think, they've had to change what they do because of online booking, online check-in, mobile apps to track your bag, kiosks at airports. If you think about that, it's been tremendously challenging for the airline industry over the last few years. United Airlines has a new strategy to deal with the problem of real-time interaction management. In the past, they would collect and analyze data as you'd expect, but now the philosophy is collect, detect, and act. So they apply 150 variables about a customer, including prior purchases, previous destinations, and so forth. They assess that in real time to determine a customer's likely actions, and they can deliver an offer in about 200 milliseconds so that if the person is making a booking or is involved in their website or their app for online check-in, they can tailor their approach to the individual. As I said, we all know the airline industry has evolved tremendously the last few years and also has suffered financial setbacks. But according to a Fortune article, this approach at United led to a year-on-year increase of 15% for United in 2014 based on their ancillary revenue. Let's look at analytics beyond the decision arbitration, and let's now focus on measurement, because we need to use our analytics to understand what's working and how we can optimize our ongoing activities. Our reports and dashboards are still critical, but they're only the starting point. Any report or dashboard has to be capable of real-time updates, and marketers will need alerts so that they can take corrective action immediately. We'll also need to look at our metrics, not just customer-focused metrics like customer lifetime value or profitability, but also those internal performance metrics like return on marketing investment, our overall revenue, and our cost. Because obviously, if we can't demonstrate our value to the business, then those investment dollars that we're seeking just won't be there for other marketing activities. Now, as the analytical environment becomes more mature and more complex, that's where we see attribution and marketing mix modeling, where we really start to build that measurement into our planning over not only the short term but the long term, so that we can get the most out of our investments. Perhaps the best example of a company that does this is Walt Disney Parks and Resorts. I mentioned earlier the need to shift to customer-managed relationships instead of CRM. Well, Disney has done that. They have a senior role which is focused on reporting and analytics for customer-managed relationships. And according to Disney, the appropriate interaction channel is whichever one the guest chooses. And Disney have a philosophy I really like. They believe that nobody at Disney owns the customer. In fact, the customer owns the relationship with Disney. But rest assured that at any given moment, somebody at Disney owns the interaction with the customer and understands the impact of that interaction to the overall customer lifetime value that they're trying to drive. So with that, Jason, I'll hand it back over to you.
All right, thanks, Rusty. And so I just want to spend a minute and talk about what does a real-time analytic environment look like? And I think some people have a lot of questions about really what's going on here. Why is it? How is that different from other types of scoring environments that I might use in a campaign management or some other type of tool? So here I'm going to start with our same website that we had before. So we have a brand website. We need to personalize a piece of content in it. Well, how's that going to work? Well, RedPoint connects to all kinds of channels through bidirectional APIs. And that could be your website, that could be email, all kinds of channels through APIs. And within the tool, there'll be a series of pieces of content, or rules, I should say, for these pieces of content. These could be business rules, or later we'll talk about what it might look like if it's machine learning rules. But for now, we'll start just with a series of business rules. Now, the content itself can be stored within RedPoint, or it can be stored in another content management solution that, again, RedPoint would connect with through APIs. We're content agnostic from that standpoint. Now, we're going to need some customer information because we want to make different decisions for different customers. And through our data management tools, we can bring together all different types of customer information, whether it's in multiple operational data warehouses, structured, unstructured, big data. We want to bring that together and bring in the necessary information into the real-time environment to set up that real-time profile. So this would be the necessary customer information we need to help us make decisions necessary for those business rules. So now let's imagine that person goes to our website. There is a call that will go through the API. This call can include contextual data, stuff like time of day, stuff like referring page. Again, it depends on the rules. And so the combination of that customer data and this contextual data, those get combined in real time to be the profile data that helps make the decision of which piece of content we're going to serve up. And then that winning content goes to the website. And then there's an important other piece. Certainly this is an interaction with one of our customers or a prospect, and we want to learn from that interaction. So we want to update our customer data warehouse with the information from that interaction. And that's how real-time marketing works. Now, maybe we want to do something a little bit more sophisticated than business rules. Or maybe we want to apply this type of personalized content across all different types of customer segments. And the idea of creating a different set of a couple dozen rules for, say, let's think about Rusty's Pizza Hut case, 17,000 different microsegments. That's a lot of business rules to create. So maybe we want to rely on machine learning instead. Maybe we want to use those adaptive self-learning models to figure out what is the best content. And at RedPoint, we support that too, and we support it in a couple ways. The easiest way is we support automated A/B tests, or ABCDN tests, if you want to test a lot more content. And once you set the requirements that make sense for your brand, those will operate in a lights-out fashion and determine what's the best content for each one of those segments. And again, segments could be a group of customers, or they could be groups of customers at certain parts of the website. There's a lot of ways to define what those groups of customers could be. Now, we might want to kind of kick the machine learning up a notch and deploy sort of sophisticated statistical algorithms, which Rusty had alluded to. And whether those are regressions or neural networks, doesn't matter a whole lot, but we want to apply the best machine learning we can to generate and determine what's the best content. Now, at RedPoint, we do a couple things that I think make this tool unique, and we have specifically made some machine learning components to help marketers. And I want to stress that. This isn't machine learning for data scientists. We support that in a different part of the tool. But what I want to talk about is machine learning for marketers. And there's a couple of important pieces that we need for that to happen. First, we need those algorithms optimized so they can be scored in real time. And we've been stressing that throughout this talk. Second, most marketers are not data scientists. So we want the marketer to actually be able to decide where they want to deploy the machine learning. And we want those algorithms to be able to train themselves in an unattended manner so the marketer doesn't have to worry about it. Now that might sound a little scary, so how do we make that robust and accurate? And actually, because of the power of big data and advances in computer science, it's not nearly as bad as it used to be when I was building models, say 10 years ago. What we can do is we can actually have the machine test billions, or actually millions is a little bit more practical, millions of different models, test different types of models, test different assumptions of models, test different training iterations for those models. And by putting millions of different versions head-to-head against each other, the machine can do a great job at finding a good model that will meet the information your customers are leaving behind and drive your conversions. And then we can also start thinking about how do we optimize these engagements across a series of interactions. But in addition to the machine learning, we also need to think about the measurement piece. And if you're going to be doing real-time decisioning, you probably want some real-time reports. And here's a simple example of a reporting portal that's native to the tool. And what I like about this is a report that gets updated in real time. So if you have a busy website and you activate this report, you can almost hypnotize yourself a little bit as the bars and the lines, bounce up and down. But we also find that a lot of clients want to combine information across channels to get a better look at their customers. So here's an example of a B2B report that's been built in the tool. So we're tracking multiple contacts per account, and we're also tracking it across 2 digital channels here, email and the website. Now with that, I'm going to hand it back to Rusty to discuss our third and final component.
Thanks, Jason. So let's take a look at orchestration, because real-time interaction management really comes to life when the offer reaches the customer. The best decision in the world is not going to produce results unless it's delivered at the right time to the appropriate touch point. Ideally, our offer orchestration will utilize the customer's preferred channel, and it will be personalized on the fly, where the content is assembled dynamically to meet the real-time requirements. Rendering a particular offer in real time is usually going to mean the web or an e-commerce site or a contact center, and typically the mobile device is going to be used in all of these instances. A single offer, of course, can involve all of those channels, or it might simultaneously involve digital channels and offline channels. And those offline channels may not necessarily be real time. As I said earlier, it might just be a confirmation email or even something you need to send in print form after the interaction, but those things are very important because the goal is not simply to conclude the interaction, it's to spark that self-perpetuating cycle of continuous interactions that will build the customer engagement over the customer lifetime. If you're a customer of Live Nation, which was of course formed when Live Nation and Ticketmaster came together, then you've seen this in action. And here I'm using Ajax as an example. They're the Dutch football team. They employ that same strategy as Live Nation Entertainment, where not only can you purchase your tickets on the phone, but the mobile app will then provide you with useful information about the venue, traveling across Amsterdam to the stadium, the concessions, whether that's food and drink or perhaps merchandise, and it guides the customer through the entire experience. It then, of course, continues after the match as well, because there will be coverage, standings, statistics, as well as promotions for the next event that are all possible interactions with the customer following his or her attendance at that football match. Orchestration is so critical that I thought we should take a deeper dive into some of the technologies that support offer delivery, because there are a lot of different products out there that will support customer engagement. Based on my research, I'm seeing that the enterprise marketing technologies really build the foundation to support the broadest range of channels, and that includes the online and the offline channels. The purely digital solutions will address the online channels like web personalization, social media personalization, or digital advertising content. And there are also really good product recommendation engines that are out there on the market, and those will focus on driving the transactions, especially in an e-commerce channel, but also perhaps in-store with proximity marketing. And then finally, we come to the analytics. And the analytics are, of course, critical, but usually they don't deliver that final layer of orchestration, which is so critical. So again, if you are going to not only recognize and understand the customer, develop the appropriate offer and measure the interactions once you make that offer, but you want to look at the orchestration as well, the enterprise marketing technologies are going to set you up to do that. Digital will be great if you're only looking at online channels. The transactional recommendations are there if you're focused on the transactions themselves, and the analytics, of course, will be a critical component no matter what you're using for orchestration. Often we see that the enterprise marketing solutions package those analytics as part of the mix. So Jason, back over to you.
Thanks, Rusty. And I just want to give an example of what orchestration might look like in the RedPoint interaction tool. So here we have a campaign. This is a campaign that involves 3 phases and 4 channels. And the goal of this campaign is to get people to register for an upcoming event. Now, when I think of orchestration and I think about coordinating communication across channels, we got a couple examples of that in this campaign. First, co-occurring with this campaign is they're using the interaction tool to broadcast the same messaging on social media channels. We find especially some of our clients with smaller marketing teams like this feature, right, and just being able to coordinate that send all from one place. Another place where we're trying to use orchestration in this campaign is for people who don't respond to the first 2 emails. Based on their customer preference data, we're testing if maybe we should be communicating with them on a different channel. Now, we've also talked a lot about this real-time analytics. So where is that in this campaign? And we've put it in a couple places. First, we're using that sophisticated machine learning that I talked about to try to increase conversions on landing pages. So the tool is learning over time what are the best types of landing pages to offer to certain types of customers, and that's a self-learning kind of lights out type of deployment, so it's very easy for the marketer to deploy themselves. If they want to use a data scientist to build that model and then have the tool incorporate the scores, we support that too, but we also want to put machine learning in the hands of the marketer. Another place that we're using this is for people who clicked on the original link but for some reason did not register. We have a little bit simpler real-time machine learning here, just a simple A/B test. We're trying a couple different offers to see if we can get them to come back and register. So this just highlights a few ways that RedPoint Interaction can support some of the analytics and orchestration things that we talked about. And finally, I just want to close with how RedPoint thinks about marketing technology and how I think that really dovetails well with the 3 areas that Rusty talked about today. So fundamentally, at RedPoint, it begins with the data. And the foundation of our modern marketing architecture is our modern data architecture, something that can ingest data from all sorts of sources and build that rich, unified customer record that you need. And again, one of the ways we're going to use that engagement record is that helps feed that real-time profile. And that ties in to the customer piece that Rusty introduced us to. Now, that information that's provided about our customers from the modern data architecture fuels our in-flight analytics. And here, when we think of in-flight analytics, we're specifically talking about real-time decisions, how machine learning can support real-time decisions, and optimization. And these are analytics that we've designed so that they're nimble and automatically improve over time. And they're analytics that can operate over large data sets, and again, they don't need a data scientist to deploy. It's a very different view than I think kind of the batch-based, somewhat static predictive analytics that we've all heard a lot about. And this ties into that analytics layer that Rusty was talking about. Now, the best data and the best analytics in the world is only important if we can use that to better communicate and better engage with our customers. And that leads us to the third layer, connected execution. And this is the layer that's important because it creates, coordinates, and delivers those moments of execution across channels. And I think that ties to that orchestration layer that Rusty introduced us to. And then finally, with that connected execution and with those interactions, that Rusty talked about, right? It's about interactions, not campaigns. We want to take that information and feed it back into the modern data architecture. So on behalf of RedPoint, I want to thank Rusty for the great presentation he delivered, and I want to thank all of you who've joined us today and volunteering some of your valuable time to learn more about real-time marketing. And with that, I think we've got a little bit of time for Q&A.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Rusty, as well, for your insights on achieving real-time contextual customer engagement today. I appreciate the examples that both of you gave toward the end there, so thank you for that. I want to remind the audience that it's now time to kick off our Q&A session. First, a few reminders. If you'd like a copy of today's presentation, click on the green resource icon to download the PDF. If you missed part of the presentation or would like to see it again, all attendees will receive an email with a link to the archived version. I'd like to remind everyone to turn off their pop-up blockers to help to take the survey during the Q&A period coming up next. So if you have a question for Jason or Rusty, you can click on the red Q&A icon at the bottom of your console. And if we don't get to your question, we'll email you a response. So I see we have a few questions coming in. Our first one is from Mike. He'd like to know what are the best measures of real-time customer engagement and customer engagement in general. So who would like to tackle that one first?
Rusty, do you want to give that a whirl, or should I go first?
Why don't you go first, and then I'm sure I'll comment, Jason.
Yeah, so I think engagement is an interesting metric, and certainly in certain business models, it can be your primary metric. So when you think about certain broadcasters or certain publishers, things like time on website can be a great metric. Now, if you're a retailer, time on website might be a really bad metric because that means people can't find what they're looking for. I think those engagement metrics are often very industry specific.
And I would agree with that. I think it varies by sector and also by different types of customers and where they are in the customer life cycle. To add to Jason's point, someone who's researching a product will probably spend more time than someone who's in buying mode. So you need to understand that if that browsing time is going to become part of the way you measure. We are seeing companies go beyond the standard lifetime value or profitability to look at an engagement score. And as we have both said, that varies by industry, and it will vary where the customer is in the life cycle. But you can look at things like the amount of time they're spending on the site. You can also look at whether or not they're engaged with you across multiple channels, including social. There are opportunities to understand who among your customers might still like to do their research and their exploration using your catalog or using print as a medium before they then go online or before they walk into a store. So there's lots of different metrics out there across the sectors that can begin to apply that will give you a better understanding of the engagement with individuals beyond some of the financial metrics.
Great. Thank you, Rusty. We have another question from Daryl. He'd like to know if either of you have any examples of how real-time contextual engagement might work in healthcare.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, Jason, you go ahead.
Sorry, Rusty. Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think one of the things that we're seeing when we talk to healthcare companies, both hospital systems and insurers and even some of the pharmaceutical companies, is they're talking to us a lot more about patient compliance metrics, and can we use what we've traditionally thought of as marketing tools, whether that's emails and text messages and updating them in real time to increase patient outcomes. And the short answer is yes. A lot of the talk that we've had today has focused on marketing outcomes, but you can easily point those business rules or those machine learning models to outcomes like taking a daily medication or visiting the physical therapist as scheduled.
And I think those are great examples. The whole concept of compliance or adherence to a treatment program, and we're seeing more of that as folks are self-monitoring, whether that's with a mobile phone or a wristband or other devices that will allow people to self-monitor and input data. We're seeing the gamification of that experience, especially for younger people. An example from the UK is the diabetes charity, Diabetes Direct, has worked with Sanofi to look at an app which is really a game. It's called Monster Mansion, and it's all about young kids with diabetes being able to monitor their blood sugar levels and input that to the game so that they can unlock weapons and tools so that they can defeat zombies and other monsters as they make their way through this game. And so the interface, of course, is there to attract them and keep them engaged. But as Jason rightfully points out, there's a lot of the same techniques that we've been talking about that are behind the scenes driving the analytics and driving those interactions to ensure that the kids who are using the app can actually input the appropriate medical information and keep their parents as well as their doctors informed about their progress.
So interesting. Thanks, Rusty. I know we have time for one more quick question. The question is, can you recommend a simple way to try out real-time marketing as part of my marketing campaigns? Jason, do you want to try that?
Sure. I think the simplest way I've seen is, if you're working with an ESP that allows real-time rendering. So this is where the content that's fed up in the email is actually determined at the moment the person clicks on the email. And that can be important because for a lot of brands, we don't check our email in real time, right? You know, when you get email from a retailer, even if you really like that retailer, you might not be checking it in real time, and you might have some other interactions with that retailer between when the email was sent and when the email was open. So the simplest case I've seen is you can do an A/B split on that. And you can have one set of content predetermined, right? And it should be, you know, personalized or targeted to those individual people, and have another piece that's then personalized or targeted in real time upon when the email is open, and then look at differences in conversion. I don't know, Rusty, have you seen anything simpler than that, or any other easy examples?
I think that was a good summary, Jason.
Well, perfect. So unfortunately, we are out of time. So thank you, Jason and Rusty, again for sharing your insights today. And thanks to everyone for joining us. This concludes Real-Time Marketing, How to Modernize Your Campaigns for Maximum Results, a one-to-one media webinar sponsored by RedPoint Global. On behalf of the entire team, thanks for attending and have a great day.